I remember the first ad campaign for the Air Max. You just had the picture of the shoe and this light coming through it. And then I found out, wow, there's a story behind this.
Emotional connection is like super important because it's like the storytelling behind the design.
If you look at the Air Max as a line and not look at them as shoes and look at them as personalities, you'll see such a variety going on. It speaks to people in so many different ways.
Air Max is the greatest sneaker line in history. It became a cultural icon without an ambassador.
For a shoe to last this long, it just has to look right, feel right when you put it on. What happened when they put full air across the bottom of a shoe? That was mind-blowing.
When you're bringing out a new Air Max, no one's certain if it's going to work. At Nike, you have the most driven people in the world. These athletes that have changed the game, all these artists. It's just this hotbed of this inspiration, creativity, and it gives you new perspectives on innovation. The idea that you're pushing forward and experimenting with possibilities. It's something that I think you're obligated to do as an Air Max designer. So the brief was really to imagine what the future of Air Max, but specifically the Air Max 90 could be. And that became the big insight around the Air Max 2090.
As a team, we started to recraft the Air Max 90 as a starting point to create the 2090. It was our responsibility to rework on this shoe just to pay tribute of the past. But a lot of sneakerheads love this shoe, and sometimes it's just like, okay, don't change anything. It's one of our most iconic of all the franchise.
You never can touch an icon. It's like you drive a car from the 60s and you will rebuild the car. Nowadays, it will never be the same.
That sort of tension comes from an older generation holding on to something that's near and dear to them.
OGs, historians have such a tangible relationship with that moment with the shoe that they can't get over that this new generation is changing it, modifying it.
I mean, the debate is how there's a lot of older people being like, oh, these younger people don't know anything, that they weren't around for it first time round.
There are some guys of a certain age who don't validate that a kid can like something just because he likes it. But my thing is, well, how does it keep going if the kid doesn't get told a story for him to be attached to it?
We talk about handing things down. When we're designing a new Air Max, we're making it for this new generation. So they have their own thing to stand with, but they can look back in the past and celebrate that as well. That's the goal for the 2090. The Visible Air all started in 1978. An aeronautical engineer by the name of Frank Rudy came to Phil Knight with this idea of a cushioning system, and it's almost weightless. But it wasn't until 1987 where everything changed. With the Air Max 1, the potential of what running footwear could be and change the game.
I fell in love with Air Max 1s as soon as they happened. The air bubble. What the hell is this?
What the hell are these?
You can look through that shoe.
You could see the air.
Just the red. Blue, of course, too.
Should I get red? Should I get blue? You wanted both.
You could kind of see the beginning of what Nike was going to become. This innovation house that was making the impossible possible. And Tinker, I think, was the person that set it off.
Tinker Hatfield, he's the GOAT. Tinker Hatfield is the sneaker oracle.
The god of shoe design.
Tinker was in Paris and he saw the buildings. And he figured out how to get that look and that idea inside of a shoe, because you have to know there was air in sneakers before that. There were airships, there were Air Force, but they just said air.
Yeah, but why not just show it? You know, it's not a bad idea to let people actually see what an airbag looks like. As a matter of fact, I've got a drawing here that actually shows what a shoe could look like with a visible window in the heel.
When the idea of exposing air started getting around at Nike, people started freaking out.
Nike thought that Tinker was out of his damn mind. To them, it was like a hole in the shoe. It wasn't air, it was a hole in the shoe.
People were like, oh, it's not gonna work, it's impossible.
Because you just couldn't understand how you were gonna wear these shoes and those bubbles weren't gonna pop.
There were some people that didn't want them there. People thought this was gonna bring down the company.
Tinker got very scary post-it on his laptop saying that he should stop what he was doing.
Like Tinker was fighting a battle with everybody about this shoe. He embodied that whole revolution aesthetic.
The 80s were about revolution. This Cold War was happening, the wall was coming down, all the political upheaval, and that was kind of this birth of this idea. Really, everything's about to change.
I was born in Eastern Germany, and it was not possible to get a cool pair of shoes. So the only chance to see that was in TV, illegally, because Western TV was forbidden. It was just a thing, you could see it, but you could never buy it. But after the wall came down, all the people from Eastern Germany got 100 Deutschmarks. And I took my first 100 Deutschmarks and I bought my very first pair of Nikes. Nowadays, I have about 2,000 pairs of Air Max. I was fascinated about the big bubble. I never saw that before. After all the years, it was just an amazing feeling to get Nikes finally.
And then, 90s.
That was the Empire Strikes Back of the Air Maxes.
Air Max 90 is almost like a school in design. You had the iconic window that framed that bag. There was leather and that mesh that was just bulletproof. Up till today, it's continued to endure because of its simplicity.
There's never been a blend or a bleed of the midsole up into the actual shoe, and it was different.
There was these hints to some of the Italian sports cars at the time, aerodynamic fins.
The use of the infrared. It wasn't regular red.
And there wasn't an influential person, an athlete that amplified the popularity of this shoe. It was just a dope shoe.
Quand je pense à cette paire-là, je pense à mes grands frères et la popularisation qu'il y a eu autour de cette paire-là. C'est ça qui nous rassemble tous.
For a shoe to last this long, the corniest guy in the world has to be able to put it on and you can go, he got the good shoes on though. If he puts on a pair of Air Max 90, infrared 90s, he's still corny, but he nailed it.
From a lifestyle and cultural standpoint, it took on something of its own.
I feel like Air Max has been able to stand because of music and hip hop and hoods everywhere. I have a love affair with sneakers. You know, me and sneakers go way back. I am from the Bronx, and at school, Nike was a status symbol. So you came in walking with some Air Max, of course, you know, you fired, you got the latest. But I used to watch the kids on my block simply because they had the fire sneakers on. They're the real fashion icons for me.
I am a DJ, I am a sneaker junkie, and I am not even from Brooklyn, I just am Brooklyn. When I wore Air Max, it was definitely, what are you doing? You have to understand, it's not like Air Max took off when they came out, not in the hood. We were still wearing basketball shoes. Air Max started as a running shoe, sure it did. It's just that, just like anything, once the hood gets it, it turns into something different. Runners are, oh, well, there's a 93 now. There's a 95 now. I need the new one. The hood's going, do they look good? I grew up in the coolest time, 70s, 80s, and moving into the 90s. That was the coolest time of cool. In 1990, hip hop's going crazy. And sneakers are part of the uniform. And when you go to Europe, there's Air Max everywhere.
The hip-hop state of mind is you trying to figure it out. You want to have what he has and make it your own. So we claiming, and we claim it with pride, the MX-1 and the MX-90s.
When that shoe came out, it's also around the same time I discovered hip-hop music. The way I grew up was in a very traditional sense, especially for Asian kids, like do good at school, become a doctor, become a lawyer. And my whole thing growing up was go against the grain, be difficult, and do what I love instead. And maybe wanting that sneaker was one of the first steps in that whole process.
We started Pata, me and my partner Guillaume Schmid. In Europe, we had different pairs that nobody else had. But I'm a DJ first, from 80s till 90s up to now, so I had all these records. When I first saw an Air Max shoe, it was probably on somebody's feet, but when I saw it on a record cover, what are those? Where can I get them?
When a subculture decides to adopt something as their own, and that's your way to find like-minded people, like you're not alone.
We are the early adapters. That's typical Dutch. It's like, all right, okay, let's make it our own version. Then the Gabber came, Gabber music.
Gabber culture goes hand in hand with huge raves, like stadiums full of crazy kids going hard all night.
And with that style of house, there came a uniform, tracksuit with some BWs. The raving all night. You cannot go with like wooden shoes.
Air Max is all about you're on your feet all day long, you're going out all night, you're gonna destroy this thing, but then you gotta do it again tomorrow and the next day. And how's this thing gonna hold up for that? All over the world, music was evolving, but I always go back to London. That was really kind of the kickoff.
I was a kid that grew up listening to drum and bass and garage and was surrounded by that. And then when it came time to making our own music, we used the same platform as them, but then we had our own identity. Right in the beginning, I didn't have a name for what I was doing. I used to turn up to raves, I just wanted to just get on the mic so I can MC, that's what it was about. But in other clubs, you weren't allowed in without shoes and a shirt. Where grime came into the game was like the rebellion to that, because we were coming dressed straight off the street. And then eventually, we took over the whole building and then it became the biggest thing.
You'd find it hard to talk about grime and not find a relevance to Air Max.
I'm wearing them on my most iconic album cover. I didn't think it would start no big movement, I'm just wearing them. I'm from the area, people don't really walk around in like suits. That was one of the things people will cuss you about if you didn't have good trainers on. You might not have all the money in the world, but you've got the right pair of trainers on, like you're someone.
Literally every artist would be wearing 90s, 95s. You see your favorite artist wearing a pair of 95s, you want to go out and buy those 95s.
This is a layered shoe. It's like material on top of material on top of material on top of material.
Sergio Lozano was the designer on that shoe. He was inspired a lot by the human anatomy, the rib cage, the tendons, the muscles, and you could really see it. This was the first time of an Air Max having that 4-foot air unit.
That was groundbreaking in itself. People were like, whoa.
This is the first Air Max having a black sole.
People are going like, you don't do this, like running shoes have white midsoles, but having Nike here in Portland, our shoes are getting dirty, we're running trails, then why not just make this built into the design?
When 95s first came out in London, they were called the 110 because that's how much they cost.
Why are they called 110s? Because they cost £110. People did things to get money, and one of the first things they did was buy trainers.
There is a huge sense of pride in where you're from and what you wear. So you'd always see people wearing like a full tracksuit and a pair of 90s or 95s. Like that was the look, and it still is. It's not changed at all.
The 95 looks nothing like the 90. Every time a new staple Air Max comes out, it's an entirely different experience. I am a sneaker historian. And I remember as a kid, me trying to find a way to raise $9.99. Mom, can I wash the dishes? Mom, can I shovel snow? Mom, can I do whatever to get my shoes? And if you take the Air Max lineage in phases, it's hard to single out like one particular shoe in the line that makes it more special than the other, but it goes back to the design because it's unlike anything before it.
Like, asking me what my favorite Air Max is basically like asking me which child do I like the most. But the 97s. Oh, it's a good shoe.
This is the first shoe that had the full-length airbag.
It's like
when Christian Tresser designed that shoe, he brought another point of view to that water drop. And there's something so subtle and beautiful about that.
This is the classic. I probably have 6 more pair of this silver bullet Air Max 97, the same exact colorway.
What did you see? You saw silver bullets.
The 97 was huge in Japan.
The bullet train in Tokyo, this transportation system that was revolutionizing the way people moved. This shoe began to do the same thing. The culture gave it that nickname, and it stuck because it was the vision of the future.
97, it's a very Italy shoe with that sense of luxury that reached the perfect balance between performance and design.
My whole career has been in the magazine fashion industry. There's been this big shift in fashion where it's all about streetwear.
Au début, la Air Max, elle était surtout acceptée en banlieue. Mais on se rend compte que cette mode-là s'est popularisée aussi au-delà de la banlieue. La banlieue influence Paris et Paris influence le monde. J'habite à Clichy-sous-Bois, dans le 93, banlieue de Paris. Et la Air Max Plus, c'est vraiment celle-là qui nous représente et qui nous a bercé tout au long de notre enfance jusqu'à aujourd'hui. Alors, on l'appelle la TN, mais on l'appelle surtout la requin, d'où la forme de la paire et les motifs qu'il y a dessus qui font. Puis un requin aussi, ça représente la puissance, et bah, ça nous représente nous, du coup. La requin, c'est une paire de chaussures que tu peux retrouver maintenant dans des fashion week. Mais pour moi, déjà, la rue en elle-même, c'est une performance. Les gens de ce milieu-là qui nous paraissaient, nous, inaccessibles, bah, ils essaient, entre guillemets, de nous ressembler.
There's an emotional attachment to sneakers, and depending on where you were in life when that sneaker dropped, what you were doing, what music you identified at that time, that will influence your sneaker choices.
When you have that clean aesthetic that's recognizable, I think it becomes a canvas for people to kind of put their play on it. I think as soon as all these artists started coming in, this becomes this art piece for culture to play with and say, like, this is how I do it.
This is basically the genesis of my working with sneaker brands career.
With Dizzy Rascal being given his own pair of 90s, I feel like that was like the pinnacle of grime and London.
I still don't know how that came about. They must have just done some talking and asked me if I wanted to do it, and I just said, yeah, obviously. It's like massive privilege, like what, to design my own trainer.
Nike came, of course, they're like, yo, do a shoe. We did 4 pairs, and it came out. And it just blew the fuck up for us. It was beautiful.
Air Max 1, we consider it our shoe. That's our uniform. That's Amsterdam. So there would not be another option. It's either Air Max 1 or no collaboration.
For me, the Air Max is seen as revolutionary. It's giving visionaries a voice, and I love that.
I was able to design the sneaker with Nike by You, and when given this opportunity, I knew straight from the bat that I wanted to incorporate in my full-time career as a mental health therapist. I do therapy with kids in foster care, so I'm constantly surrounded by trauma. I have sneaker decals on my office wall, so it's really cool when I have teenagers come into my office and be like, yo, Miss Liz, you have some drip.
I have fallen in love with Air Max ever since I was a kid. In the high school that I went to, sneakers were kind of a refuge for me.
For me, I think the most iconic sneaker that warms my heart are the La Mezcla, designed by Gabrielle Serrano.
I was born in Queens. I work in the medical field. I have like younger kids coming in and they're like, oh my God, you're like the cool nurse that wears sneakers. I wanted to make it not just a shoe about myself. That's why I ended up doing all the different skin tones to highlight everybody in New York. The Air Max, even though it's meant for performance, is just taking on a whole new evolution.
When you have that canvas, everyone loves it. They feel connected to it. The 90s was like the golden age of Air Max. And I think now, looking back, we're kind of going, let's do that again.
I don't think there's such thing as creating icons. Icons just happen. Just like when somebody goes, oh, I'm gonna go in the studio, this song's gonna be a classic. You're a liar. Either it just happens or it doesn't happen. For a sneaker to become an icon, the people have to make it the icon.
I do believe that you can take something iconic and make it better, as long as you have the respect for what came prior.
I don't think the new generation has their own shoe in that same sense that we had. Our generations should encourage younger kids to do stuff your own way. We're not growing up in this time.
Regardless of what a designer or Nike wants to make it, it's the culture that makes it what it is. There's history of where Air Max came from, but it's uniquely modern and uniquely now. That's what this is. This is the new generation's Air Max. This is made for them. We kind of thought about future cities, future of fashion, reducing distractions, and this idea of simplicity.
Not like just doing a mashup or two shoe, it was really to create the new Air Max 90. It's this very sensitive balance between having something modern and something familiar. You have this duality between expression and experience. This is why people relate to the shoe. This is what makes Air Max Air Max.
We're celebrating anniversaries for shoes that when they were making them, they thought they were gonna go away.
Oh yeah, these are fire.
The only reason why these things keep going is because the story keeps getting told from an older guy to a younger guy to a younger guy to a younger guy, and it still looks perfect.
Are these for me, yeah?
MX already unites people. That's why we're here. That's why we have this conversation. You will find a 17-year-old kid rocking a regular Air Max, and that's a shoe that came out in the 90s.
For it to resonate through generations, you know, families, grandmas. My mom has a pair of Air Max. I have a pair of Air Max, and it'll stand the test of time. I know that for a fact.
This isn't just Nike's, this is everybody's.
The only rule
of Air Max.
Air Max.
Air Max is to break.
Break the rules.